Cultural Aspects of Learning Presentation Assignment by Caroline Edgar. The culture that I have chosen is Ukraine. I chose this culture because I had a former student of mine that was in third grade entering an educational setting in a public school in Connecticut for the first time ever. He did not know anyone, and this was back in 2022. There were, however, other Ukrainian students in the school, and he had a Ukrainian buddy to support his transition to his new school environment and culture. This was to help him ease into his new environment and culture. He only spoke Ukrainian and did not speak any English at all. According to research, Ukrainian shared a common linguistic and cultural space with Russia until 2014. In 2020, the official status of the Ukrainian language was revoked in the territories controlled by Russia, Ukrainian world. Cultural background. As my new student entered his new classroom environment in the third grade, he was a quiet observer. He chose not to talk much. He did make eye contact. He nodded his head a lot, and he said yes to many new words and interactions from his new peers and teachers. I found it surprising as one of his teachers, after reading the research article about his background language, that his previous literacy knowledge had been in both Ukrainian and Russian prior to entering the US, which means now he's expected to learn an additional new language, which would be a third language for him and make him quite a multilingual learner. According to research, in 2020, the official status of the Ukrainian language was revoked in the territories controlled by Russia, and that teachers who used to teach Ukrainian are now teaching Russian, and all Ukrainian language literature has been pulled from school libraries, forcing him to have learned literacy, reading and writing, predominantly in Russia, previously before entering the United States, where he is expected to now learn reading and writing and all literacy instructional needs in English. Launching into a new school environment and culture for my third grade Ukrainian student. There was a quote that was very important in my research that I came across, and it says, "As you approach the teaching of reading and writing to L's, you will want to be aware of the literacy knowledge of your students bring with them, such as the literacy background that I learned from my student having been taught Ukrainian as well as Russian language." So he came to the US entering our third grade school environment, not only knowing one previous language, but two previous languages. When considering the needs for reading and writing with appropriate literacy instructional planning for L students, I learned that it is most critical to get to know their literacy background and assess what they already know in their native language and in English. A literacy assessment will act as a target plan for appropriate intervention with literacy skill instruction in English. Research says, as you approach the teaching of reading and writing to L's, you will want to be aware of the literacy knowledge the students bring with them. Did they have a lot of knowledge in one language? Did they have knowledge in multiple languages previous to entering the United States and expecting to learn English? My student displayed some resistance to speaking and writing in English when we first met him and he entered our classroom. As a teacher, we're trying to overcome the challenge of understanding why is he being so resistant to learning and adapting to the English language in his new environment and culture. Understanding his background, former literacy experiences, and developing an individual relationship with getting to know him as an individual and what his interests are, can be a motivating factor for teachers finding new strategies and ways to support him with his learning. Research suggests teachers getting to know their EL students on an individual basis is to engage students effectively in the learning process. Teachers must know their students and their academic abilities individually, rather than relying on racial or ethnic stereotypes or prior experience with other students of similar backgrounds. I learned that my student happened to love playing basketball, and after school, he really enjoyed walking into town and buying smoothies. We used these interests of his for incorporating into an informational writing session where he could write about playing basketball. We also found and researched audiobooks and books on basketball because this was very motivating to him and it was encouraging him to want to read and to learn more about something that was of very much interest to him. Addressing the domains of literacy instruction for my EL learner and finding the best strategies to support foundational literacy skills, comprehension, and vocabulary development with EL learners in the elementary grades. It is very, very important for a teacher to be able to target and plan appropriate literacy instruction, primarily foundational literacy skills, to help support the student with developing decoding and fluency skills, as well as comprehension and vocabulary. So the student is understanding what they're reading and understanding the meaning of new words. So that text and academic language all make sense to the student, as well as helping them to develop oral language skills in a comfortable environment with their peers. A foundational literacy assessment will act as a target plan for appropriate literacy skill instruction in English. Once an assessment is done, a target plan for appropriate literacy skill can then be used with a student for differentiating where their skills need to start on using a scope and sequence and a structured literacy approach. Once that student has been introduced to learning a skill on that scope and sequence, then they can, it's a layering effect, so then they can move on to the next skill and then the next skill. And this will help them strengthen their decoding and fluency skills. This can be done through offering direct explicit literacy instruction using multisensory and hands-on strategies. Hands-on activities can help teach the letter-sound relationships. The student can manipulate sounds and segment sounds using sound chips, Elkonin boxes, or known as sound boxes, and magnetic letters. Multisensory approaches and hands-on activities help train the brain for learning and making a connection from what they're doing with their hands and committing it to memory. Fostering active comprehension and through asking and answering questions. Once the student is displaying comfortable decoding and fluency skills, active comprehension is an essential skill. Students can use visual graphic organizers to write and organize their questions. They can ask questions before reading. They can ask questions after reading. You can partner the student up in a small group and with peers so that they feel comfortable developing and using their oral language in their new English language. Also, teaching vocabulary so that the student has a strong sense of the meaning of words and the context of what they're reading. Pre-teaching vocabulary is very important. This can be done again with this learner in a small group. Reading Rockets, which is a research-suggested article, talks about the importance of pre-teaching vocabulary strategies. Role-playing, using gestures, showing real objects, pointing to pictures, doing quick drawings and using Spanish equivalent, and then asking students to say the word in English. In my student's situation, the student would be asked to use a Ukrainian equivalent word. Next, according to research, the best practice for literacy research for struggling readers is direct explicit instruction. As an L learner, they are struggling to learn English and to read and write in English, and that the instructional approach for using a direct instruction is a highly structured instructional approach designed to accelerate the learning of at-risk students. Curriculum materials and instructional sequences attempt to move students to mastery at the fastest possible pace. I was surprised to learn that when I work with students with language-based learning disabilities, a direct, explicit instructional approach is highly effective for them with mastering new skills using a structured literacy approach, and that the same approach for L learners is effective in their learning process as well. Recommendations for supporting L students with Ukrainian cultural background in the classroom is to understand the Ukrainian student's background and literacy experience, such as the fact that my student happened to have 2 languages and was exposed to 2 languages before expecting to learn English. Develop individual relationships with the Ukrainian students and the L learners and find what their interests are and what motivates them as a learner. For example, my student happened to love playing basketball, and this was a very strong motivating factor with selecting books of choice that motivated the student to read. Use targeted, direct, explicit instruction, visuals for developing comprehension skills, and pre-teach vocabulary instructions to support academic vocabulary development. Offer working in peer and small groups for helping the L student to strengthen and feel comfortable, strengthening their oral language development. Thank you for learning ways to support L learners in the instructional classroom environment. Here are references for research that I learned my information from, and thank you very much for listening to this presentation. Have a great evening.